Welcome and thank you all for standing by. Today's call is being recorded. If you have any objections, you may disconnect at this time. All participants are in a listen-only mode until the question-and-answer session for today's conference. At that time, you may press star 1 on your phone to ask a question. I would now like to turn the conference over to Jackie McGinnis. You may begin.
Thanks, Kira. And thank you all for joining us this morning. I'm NASA Press Secretary Jackie McGinnis, and I'm happy to be joined today by NASA Administrator Bill Nelson and Dr. Kate Calvin, who joined the agency yesterday to serve as Chief Scientist and Senior Climate Advisor. Dr. Calvin was previously an Earth Scientist at the Pacific Northwest National Laboratory's Joint Global Change Research Institute in College Park, Maryland. And at NASA, Kate will serve as a principal advisor to the administrator and other agency leaders on NASA science programs, strategic planning, and policy. Before I hand it over to her, I'd like to invite Administrator Nelson to share a few thoughts.
Hey, everybody. Well, this is a big deal to us. Kate is exceptionally talented, and we have created this new position of a dual role of Chief Scientist and Senior Climate Advisor. We've chosen to elevate this Senior Climate Advisor position. Kate will serve as the Principal Advisor on science programs, strategic planning, and science policy. And she will also represent the agency's objectives to the national and international science communities. The Chief Scientist role has been to integrate science across the agency. And since we have a handful of mission directorates, to harmonize and coordinate that science activity in and among them. And her experience in the past makes her especially qualified for this position. She was at the Pacific Northwest National Laboratories. They have a Global Change Research Institute where her specific task was modeling an integrated human-Earth system. And that's going to be particularly helpful as she carries out her duties. And, I sometimes am amazed that when you think of NASA, folks don't understand just how involved in science we are, and specifically climate change. So if you think, for example, why did NASA get invited to FEMA on the first day of the hurricane season, when you would typically think that there are the agencies like not only FEMA, but NOAA, the National Weather Service, various other agencies, Department of Homeland Security. Well, all of those instruments that are measuring what is happening to the climate, they're done by NASA. We design them, we build them, we launch them. Some of them we turn over to agencies like Geospatial Agency. Others we turn over to agencies like NOAA, the National Weather Service, to operate. But a number of them we operate ourselves, including what we announced earlier last year, the 5 great observatories that we are putting up over the course of the next decade. These observatories are going to give us a 3D holistic view of what is exactly happening to the climate as we measure very precisely what is happening to the land and to the seas and to the ice and to the atmosphere. So NASA really is the point of the spear when it comes to climate change. And NASA is going to continue to lead on climate. We're going to continue to lead in space and aeronautics. We need consistency, and we need funding. Now, I'm very confident that the Congress is going to come to a bipartisan, bicameral agreement on fiscal year 22 funding. This is very important for us, not to have a continuing resolution that would go back to fiscal year 21, because to accomplish our goals in so many areas, but not the least of which is the subject matter of today, climate science, we need that additional funding. So with that, it is my privilege to introduce to you Dr. Catherine Calvin. She is a PhD from Stanford. Welcome to NASA, Kate.
Thank you. I'm Kate Calvin, and I'm really excited to join NASA as the Chief Scientist and Senior Climate Advisor. My background is in math, computer science, and engineering, and I started doing climate research in grad school. Since that time, I've been at the Pacific Northwest National Lab's Joint Global Change Research Institute, where my research has focused on how Earth and human systems interact and change, including developing scenarios of future climate and quantifying effects of climate change, among other topics. My research has spanned the range of climate science, climate impacts, and mitigation. My research has also involved a lot of multidisciplinary work, and I have a lot of experience working with people from different fields, like physics and ecology, hydrology, and economics. I'm looking forward to helping communicate and advance all of NASA's science going forward.
Okay, guys, let's open it up to you for questions.
So in order to enter the queue, if you could please press *1. And Kira, could you please enter the chat? Kira, are you there? Operator.
Our first question comes from Elizabeth Howell. Your line is now open.
Thank you, Dr. Calvin. Welcome to NASA. And so just kind of a look ahead sort of a question. So I know that on the NASA side, at least, we have 4 Earth science missions that are going to be launching next year. But when you're sort of looking into the next maybe 3 to 5 or even 10 years, what kind of gaps in the fleet are you hoping to start to address or discuss with your colleagues? So either due to aging of existing satellites or due to just not having the capability yet in orbit? Thank you.
Well, the short answer is all of the above, but I want Kate to flesh it out for you.
Yes, so NASA is working, as the administrator mentioned, on designing a set of Earth-focused missions as part of the Earth System Observatory, and these will work together to create a 3D holistic view of the Earth. The first part of that is a partnership with the Indian Space Research Organization called NISAR, and NISAR can help measure changes in the Earth's surface, which will help us understand things like ice sheet collapse and landslides. And there's a lot more planned, and I'm looking forward to learning that as I settle in at NASA.
And remember what I said, this 3D holistic view is looking at all the very precise changes that are occurring with land, water, ice, and atmosphere, and it includes the water, not only what's happening to the oceans, but we can even measure the elevation of the water in what is happening in our rivers. This is something new.
Okay, next question.
Our next question comes from Marcia Smith. Your line is now open.
Thank you very much. Dr. Calvin, obviously your background is in climate science and you're dual-headed as a senior climate advisor, but I'm curious as to what your other interests are in NASA science, and apart from Earth science, where do you think that your other focuses will be?
Yeah, thank you. So I've always been interested in space and NASA science. Like many people, my introduction to NASA was through movies. So I remember watching Apollo 13 years ago and being amazed at how NASA scientists work together. As someone with a background in math, computer science, and engineering, I was inspired by seeing women in STEM help launch a man into orbit in Hidden Figures. So NASA shows us what happens when you bring together a team of really smart people to explore the universe and solve problems. I'm excited to be a part of that. I'm also looking forward to several of the missions that are upcoming. So like many people, I woke up early on Christmas morning to watch the launch of the James Webb Space Telescope. And it will start sending us images this summer, and we'll be able to look back 13.5 billion years to only 300 million years after the universe was formed. And so that's really exciting to me. I'm also looking forward to seeing the DART mission, which will help try to change the orbit of an asteroid. But in general, my interest is in trying to connect the climate science research with the rest of the research in NASA. And so some of the things I'm interested in learning about is more about the systems on board the International Space Station, which help recycle and reclaim water. And can we think about how to make that useful back on Earth? There's a lot of communities that are facing water scarcity today, and that's expected to increase in the future, making it harder for them to produce energy and agriculture. So can we think about what we've done in space and connect that to what we can do on Earth? And those are just some of the interests I have going forward here at NASA. Thanks, Kate. And just a reminder, if you'd like to ask a question, you can press *1. Over to you, Kira.
Our next question comes from Paul. Your line is now open.
Hi, yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah, yes, sir. I can hear you.
Okay. Yeah, it's Paul Brinkman with UPI. I would like if one or both of you could address, what areas of, we've talked a lot about monitoring, and obviously that's crucial, and it's NASA's primary mission in terms of climate change. But what about mitigating? Are there some areas that you could mention that, NASA would could do some new things on in terms of like carbon capture or energy efficiency, or what areas are you most interested in?
All right, thanks. Paul, I appreciate the question, and it's an important answer to your question. First of all, understand you can't measure, you can't mitigate what is happening to the environment, to climate. You can't mitigate it unless you can measure it. So that underscores the importance of all of these observatories and scientific instruments that we have. Now, your specific question on mitigation, and Kate will be coordinating this, for example, among the different mission directors, takes, for example, aeronautics. Okay, we are developing green fuels. We are just about to fly an all-electric airplane. Pam, Bob, and I saw this airplane out at the Armstrong Center out in California. It's getting ready to fly. Look at the efforts that NASA has been involved in with other agencies, for example, relating with the Department of Defense in fuels that are made not where you are putting in ethanol, for example, things that don't come directly from carbon-based fuels. You could go through each one of the mission directorates. So let's take, for example, the human exploration. Okay, we're going to the moon we're going to start digging around with one of our commercial missions called the acronym CLIPS, and it's going to dig around on the south pole of the moon and see if there's water underneath the surface, since we know there's water there in the shadowed crevices. If there is substantial water, then all of a sudden we have fuel. We have a gas station, and it's not carbon-based, and you don't have to bring it all the way from Earth to fuel your spacecraft. These are the kinds of things that Kate will be coordinating among the mission directorates.
Our
Kate?
next question comes from Zach.
Hold on.
Your line is now open.
Oh. Hold on, Kiera.
We're not done, Kara. I was turning it over to Kate.
Yeah, thank you, Kara. Just wanted to highlight a few more things. So first of all, in addition to what the administrator pointed out, NASA also has a climate modeling capability, which is able to look at different emission scenarios and how that affects climate and air quality. On the aviation front, NASA's made contributions in the past to reducing fuel use and emissions in aviation, and as the administrator mentioned, that will continue forward today. And since you specifically mentioned carbon capture, the International Space Station's environmental control and life support systems actually include carbon dioxide removal. And so that's something, again, back on this, can we bring space exploration back to Earth? Could be an interesting thing to pursue. Thanks so much. And Kira, back to you.
Again, if you would like to ask a question, please press *1 from your phone. Our next question comes from Zach. Your line is now open.
Hi, thanks for doing this call. Zach Coleman with Politico here. There's been quite a bit of private sector acquisition of climate risk analytic firms, and some of the people that I've talked to in the climate science community are concerned that the public won't have access to these sophisticated tools that can warn them about any sort of climate risks that they face. I'm wondering, with the Earth observation missions that NASA is starting, do you see a role for NASA in providing analytical tools to ensure that businesses, people, and cities can actually have this sophisticated data so that it's not all bought up by private sector companies that use it for their own purposes?
Hey, Zach. We aim to have this information to be transparent and accessible. And remember, a couple of months ago, I said that I would like very much, ultimately, to put together a mission control center for climate change, which would be and it could be virtual as well as physical, so that so many would have the opportunity to have the data almost real time. If you look at today, for example, on our satellites that do weather, that's real time. Or look at Landsat 9 that we just put up, which is a series of Landsats. Think about the farmer in Iowa that has a cornfield and wants to measure whether or not there's disease in his crops. He can get that data today. Or the moisture content of the soil where he is planting. He can get that data today. And as we get more sophisticated in our instruments that can measure what is happening to the Earth and its climate, we certainly want that sophisticated information to be available to all people, not just governments. Kate?
Yeah, and just in addition to that, the NASA Earth Science data is free and open to the public today, but one of the things we want to work on is making it easier to find and use and accessible, particularly to underserved communities. Thank you very much. Back to you, Kira.
Our next question comes from Neela. Your line is now open.
Neela, you might
All
be muted.
Oh, sorry about that. Yes, sorry. This is Neela Banerjee from NPR. Thanks for holding this call. And this is a question for Dr. Calvin. But I wanted to explore a little bit more the whole NASA's capacity to provide observational data on, this whole 3D effort on forests, on emissions, on rivers. Last year, our colleagues at the Washington Post did an excellent series that looked at how emissions from a lot of countries are understated, and that we don't have an accurate sense of emissions, especially from things like land use. So I was wondering what kind of role NASA's technology could play in giving us a better sense of what emissions are worldwide, and especially from rather difficult phenomena like land use. Is that something that is part of this 3D, this kind of 3D look at the Earth, or other work that NASA does or is planning to do? Thanks.
Yeah, so NASA has more than 24 satellites and instruments in orbit, including some on the International Space Station, and they measure a variety of things, including things like carbon dioxide and other things. And as the administrator mentioned, Landsat gives us a picture of how land use has changed. And I think by using sort of a satellite constellation, you do get this sort of comprehensive, again, the Earth System Observatory is going to be a 3D holistic view of the Earth, and that's different from some of the other emissions data that's out there that's more inventory-based and self-reported. And so NASA gives us a broader perspective on climate as a whole and specific variables within that. Thank you. Back to you, Kira.
Our next question comes from Ivan. Your line is now open.
Hello. Thank you very much for taking my question. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, we can.
It's Ivan Pilshikov with TASS News Agency. Administrator Nelson, may I ask you if there might be any update regarding the timing of your visit to Russia, and are you planning to discuss with your Russian colleagues any issues related to climate change and, the possible cooperation between NASA and Roscosmos in tackling the climate crisis? I mean, maybe in terms of monitoring and so on. Thank you so much.
NASA is in contact with our Russian colleagues all the time because, as you know, we operate the International Space Station together as we speak. Our astronauts and Russian cosmonauts always have a continuous presence on the space station, and as Kate earlier said, there are scientific experiments that are going on the space station that have a direct relationship to climate. Now, specifically, of course, climate will be an issue when I visit with Dmitry Rogozin in virtually an official government visit. It will certainly be, since it is one of the high agenda items, not only for NASA, but for the entire U.S. government. As to when that trip is going to occur, I am simply at the mercy of COVID. And until we see subsiding of this pandemic, I'm not going to be able to go, and that's why we frequently utilize telephone calls, and of course our agency is in constant contact. We have people that are NASA employees that are over there because, as you know, we send American astronauts on Russian Soyuz rockets to and from the International Space Station. So I'm looking forward to meeting personally Dmitry, and in the meantime, we'll continue to talk as frequently as need be.
Thank you, and it looks like that's our final question. I want to thank you all for joining us today. This week is a big one for climate news. So on Thursday, we'll be announcing 2021's global temperature at 11 a.m. with our partners at NOAA. So stay tuned for more information about the announcement, and I hope you have a wonderful day.
I want to say one other thing on some of the earlier questions about how we are so inextricably entwined with our subject matter in other agencies of the U.S. government. Simply, there is not another agency that does not relate in some way or another to the job that NASA is doing. And this is why then, as we look to the outside world, how NASA represents such soft power as we project our values and our interest of our people across the world. And you will see that continued to be displayed as we are more and more involved in trying to bring about the precision of understanding what is happening to our climate with these instruments and processes that we've talked about today. Thank you all for joining us. I appreciate it. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your participation in today's conference. You may disconnect at this time.